Hello, today we are going to be performing a deep clean on this dryer. So even if you make sure to clean your lint trap after every use, you still want to perform a deep clean every once in a while. The exact frequency of how often you do this really depends on how much you use your dryer and perhaps how linty your clothes are. But one sure way of knowing that it definitely needs a deep clean is if your lint trap doesn't go down all the way. If we try to push it down and it sticks up a little bit, there is lint that's collected on the inside and it definitely needs to be removed. That's not the only sign, that's just one of the signs that it needs a deep cleaning. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I did recently perform a deep cleaning of this dryer, so it's already going to be clean, but I will still do a walkthrough to show exactly how you do it and what screws you need to remove, how to take the panels off, that kind of thing. What tools do you need? Well, it's very simple. You really only need a Phillips-drive screwdriver, a slotted drive or a flat blade screwdriver, and a vacuum. I recommend using a shop vacuum, one of the serious ones, with a narrow tip to make sure to get into the cracks and crevices. Also, I prefer to have some tape on hand as well. One thing to remember as you're working on the washing machine and you're removing all these panels is the inside can actually have some pretty sharp edges, so you don't want to cut yourself. So just make sure you watch out for that. You might even want to wear gloves. The first step, of course, is to unplug the dryer. The next step is to take off the top lid. On the back of the dryer, you will notice that there is a screw in this corner and one in the other corner. Those screws you will need to remove in order to take the lid off. This is why I prefer the short screwdriver for working on the dryer, because it can get into these tight areas. If you recall, I mentioned that I like to have some tape on hand. That's because this dryer has multiple different size screws and you have to remember where they all go. It's easy to take a little tape, masking tape, leaves no residue, and is easy to peel. Take a little piece of tape and just tape your screws near the hole where they go. This way, when it's time to reassemble, I know exactly which screws go into which holes. Now that those two screws in the back are removed, we take the lid off. To do this, you simply push the lid back and lift up. The next step is to remove this front panel. To do that, you will loosen two more screws here. The one in this corner right over here, and a matching one in the corner right over there. Here are my two screws. I'm going to again take a little piece of tape and attach the screws near the hole where they go. Now to take off this top panel, you'll notice that there are some tabs protruding here and also some tabs right here that are plastic, they're part of plastic, and they kind of hook down this way and they keep the panel from falling forwards. So what you need to do is you need to pull a little bit up on the ones that end up hooking over the metal and then pushing. And Over here, similarly, here's the next hooking one. Pull it up and push. There's one here, pull it up and push. And there we have the panel coming off. Okay. Don't do anything too forcefully, just to make sure not to break anything. You'll notice that this panel, there's a wire going to the control board here. You don't actually need to disconnect it. If you just set it aside, you can leave it all wired up. There is enough slack in the connection here where you don't need to do anything else. The next step is to take the main front panel off. There are going to be 2 screws to remove on the left side, 1 screw to remove on the right side, and 2 screws to remove down here. 1 here and 1 there. You do not need to remove the door. You do not need to remove any of these ones on the left by the latch. These screws tend to be a little tight. Make sure you do not allow the screwdriver to cam out. By that I mean slip. For when you're driving the screw, give it a good amount of forward pressure to make sure that that doesn't happen. When you slip the screwdriver, that usually ends up damaging the screw drive, and then it just becomes hard to use. So always make sure you have a sufficient amount of pressure. I suppose you could use an impact driver and avoid that problem as well. Those 3 screws are all the same, so I will use 1 piece of tape and put them all right here. Now for these 2 screws, which are different. As you're loosening these screws up, the door will start to pull the front panel forwards. I suppose thinking about it now, it's probably easier to take these bottom screws out first, then work on the top ones. But either way, as you're doing this, have your shoulder resting against the front panel to keep it all from wanting to fall forwards. I'm going to tape the screws for these holes a little further down so I can close the door for a little more room. Now before we go further, you'll notice that there is a connector here that you will need to remove before removing the front door panel. You could theoretically remove it ahead of time before unscrewing the door, but it's very hard to get your fingers in there. So I prefer to first let the door panel move forwards a little bit before I move the connector. You simply pull on it to get it to come out. You might have to wiggle a little bit. Now make sure when you do pull on the connector, pull on the plastic, not on the wire. Now that the connector is disconnected, we will remove the front panel by tilting it forwards a little bit and then lifting it straight up. You'll notice that there is a slot and tab on each of these ends. So when you lift the panel, that's what happens. Okay, so here's what we're looking at. Next step will be to remove this cover here and to remove the insert that holds the lint trap. For the cover, there are 2 screws. One here, one there. Now for the lint trap, there is going to be a screw, actually you can see it popping through right over here, on the inside. You can see that there is a recession over here where you put your screwdriver through, and you're going to have to feel around for it until you feel it engage and loosen that screw there. There's one on this side, you can see it moving, and you're going to do the same thing for the other side right over here. That screw won't be able to come out all the way while this plastic panel is in this position, but that's okay. As long as the screw has been removed from the threads in here, you'll be able to move it back, and this screw can stay inside the recession. That's fine. Now, after those two outer screws, there are two more inner screws right down over there. I'm going to remove the lint trap so that it's not in the way. Now you're ready to remove this lint trap holder. Since I recently cleaned this, it's not very dirty, but otherwise you would expect a lot of lint here. You'd want to clean all that out with your shop vac. One thing to mention is as you remove this, this little piece here, I believe this is the moisture sensor, does separate away from this. You can leave it in here. It's actually wired, so you would have to disconnect the connectors if you want to take it out, but I would just leave it in there because you can get this out without it. Now that that piece is separate, you can take off the bottom that you previously unscrewed. You have to pull towards you and then down to remove it. Again, if this had not been cleaned recently, there would be a ton of lint inside. One thing to remember with this plastic piece is you have the screws in those recessions, so if you put it upside down, the screws might come out, so just be aware that they might fall out so you don't lose them. Another area where there would be lint is in the vicinity of this fan, so you can take off this cover by removing the two screws right over here. This cover lifts up and then out. There's a little catch right here. So now you'd go ahead and you'd vacuum this area, try to get the veins as clear as possible, and of course anywhere else where you see lint on the inside of the machine. Don't forget about the back of the machine too. We're going to push it forwards, and you want to remove your flexible hose here. To do that, you loosen your hose clamp here, that metal hose clamp, with your flat blade screwdriver. And once it's loosened, you just pull it straight off, and then you're going to clean as much as possible in there with a brush, vacuum, your hands, anything you have. And then for this flexible hose, I'd recommend loosening the other side as well. Clean the inside of this hose, replace it if it needs it. If there's any holes, certainly replace it if it needs it. Also, if you can clean the inside of the pipe that this hose connects to as much as possible, go ahead and do that as well. Basically, anywhere where you see lint, go ahead and clean that off. Okay, now it's time to put everything back together. First thing we're going to do is reattach the vent, the hose in the back, to the dryer. It's fairly simple. Slide this back on. Make sure you can tell that it's on all the way. And then tighten. Here's where all those taped on screws really come in handy. I right away know that my screws for this part are these two. To put this back on, you make sure that this little tab here fits, hooks over the metal of the dryer. And then you simply install the screws. If the screws aren't going in easily, try backing them up all the way until you get to a click, and try again. Sometimes the thread just didn't catch properly, and instead of forcing your way through, you can back up until it clicks and then go forwards all the way. For the next part, you'll notice that there is a gasket over here. You'll want to make sure it sits flat against this part here. So what we're going to do is align it first. Now this part here sits behind the white here, so you're going to have to kind of go in like that, loop it around. Then try to align the circular feature on the left. One of the ways you can do that is just by looking at the screw holes and making sure that they match up. There we go. And then you should be able to push it right up against it. There we go. Make sure these are fairly tight, as this whole area will vibrate a little bit when the dryer is running, and vibrations can loosen screws if they're not tight. Also make sure that the wire here is not pinched when you're installing it. That's free to move. Next we will uninstall the lint trap. If you'll notice, these screws fell out of the recesses, so just make sure you are aware of where they are. Also keep in mind this part can separate. It's not a big deal. There's a piece here that comes apart. If that happens, just push it back together. I'm trying to do it here with one hand, but there we go. It just fits into these features here so that it's one piece. So you put it back into the slot where it was before, and as you lower it in, what you're looking for is, number one, don't pinch the wire over there. It's going to want to pinch, so you're going to want to keep that clear, and then you're going to want to slide this area inside the metal a little bit so this gasket will contact it on the inside. And same thing on this side here. This will be sliding in, so you're watching for those 3 points. Looking at this corner, looking at that corner, and making sure the wire is not pinched. One thing to also make sure is that the filter kind of cover here, that it fits inside it, because it looks like it kind of came apart earlier, but instead of taking it out, you can actually push it in if you pull this apart, so it's not a problem. Once it's in there, this will stick up a little bit. That's fine. What's important is that when you put the screws in on the other side, again, I'll need my second hand for this and a screwdriver to kind of guide the screw, but it should be popping out through the hole there. There you can see it is going through. Let's reinstall the front panel. Lift up your front panel, bring it over, and what you're going to do is the 2 slots all the way at the bottom on the left side and on the right, you're going to want to put them on those hook features on either side. right there. Then we're going to move this up close. Plug in your connector. This is very simple. You just push. This is as far as it goes, so that's about it. Okay, now the next thing to do would be to install the screws that we have here. They go 1, 2, and 3 right over there. So we'll do those next. Remember, make these fairly tight because they are holding the weight of the door. Okay, now that that's on, I'm going to open the door and install the 2 screws that go here and here. Okay, moving along. Next step will be to put that front panel back on that we have. So, one thing to watch out for, make sure this cable doesn't get in the way. The black one there, you might have to kind of push it underneath. And this goes in. And you're going to line it up. And just keep kind of pushing it back and forth, making sure it's all lined up. And then if you remember those clips, these all have to line up, all these tabs, and then these tabs on top, that one, and that one, they all have to make sure that they're sitting on top and they're kind of hugging the metal edge there. Now it's time to put the cover back on. I'm going to move this cable out of the way. And we're going to put the cover back on, make sure it's oriented properly. That overhang back there faces the back. Just place it right on top. We got about an inch clearance here. Should be flat all the way across, and then all you do is just slide it forward. Should go on really easily. And then you've got those 2 screws. They go on each corner. Okay, let's plug it in. Looks good. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and like, and even leave a comment if you have any ideas for different videos or other suggestions or any questions.